Hello, everyone. Thanks for joining us today for the NewBlue ColorFast Color Reinvented webinar. My name is Adam Dolan, and I'll be your moderator today. You can follow other attendees and share with your followers on Twitter by using the hashtag NBFXColor and handle @NewBlueFX. We want to hear from you, so if you have any questions or comments during the presentation, use the question and answer panel on the right side of your GoToWebinar player to share at any time during the webinar. We'll pause briefly at the end of each section to answer a few of your questions and then do our best to get to all of them at the end of the presentation. At this point, I want to introduce our VP of Products, Travis White. Travis has more than 15 years of experience in video and 3D applications. He's developed more than 30 products and worked as a Hollywood editor. Today, he's going to show you how ColorFast will reinvent the way you see color. Travis, welcome.
Thank you, Adam. Appreciate it. And first things first, I guess we want to just go through what we'll cover so you guys get an idea of just kind of the total flow and all the different parts we're going to go through. So the first step here is we're going to look at what is primary and what is secondary selections within ColorFast. Next we're going to be looking at the way we've reinvented luminance, really, the approach of luminance. Many of you are familiar with the notion of curves, working with your luminance where it's all on one curve, high, mid, and shadow, and we'll show you how we approach that differently. Next, we're going to look at a feature that we have called skin preservation. Most often, when you're doing color correction, especially grading, your audience, as well as yourself, we're most keen or attuned to human skin tone and color, and we want to show how to preserve that while we're doing some more extreme grades in the process. Next, we'll look at color masking with shapes, and that will be involved in that. Isolated correction challenges, and as well as applying grades to a full sequence. When you've done individual correction to each clip, how do you go ahead and put a whole look over a full sequence within Sony Vegas Pro? So, I guess without further ado, we will get into our presentation in Sony Vegas. So the first thing I have here is a clip that is looking up into some buildings. In fact, if I go ahead and play that here, you'll see that it's kind of moving down the street. And then the second clip here is we have this girl walking down the street. So it's a little bit of a short storytelling where she's going through this city. And in both of these cases, we want to emphasize blue. That's kind of the thing we want to do for this particular process. So I'm going to use this skyscraper clip to introduce you to the fundamentals of NewBlue ColorFast and show you the different sections of it. So the first thing I want to do in Vegas Pro is go to my video effects. So you can find video effects under NewBlue ColorFast for Windows, and you drag and drop it down to an event on your timeline. So I'm going to drag and drop it into the skyscraper. Now when I first apply it, you have two major sections that you see. There's primary correction and there's secondary correction. Primary correction is the notion of the whole picture. What does the whole picture look like? What's your general white balance issues? What are your general exposure and contrast issues? That's what you deal with in the primary correction. The secondary correction has to do with your individual highlight, midtones, and shadows. So what is happening independently in those three regions as far as luminance, color, those kinds of things. And lastly, masks. This is where you find the skin preservation mask or color mask. And it's also where you find a shape mask, so you can dial in a unique shape to isolate your corrections. So that's a brief walkthrough of all the different components or parts of NewBlue ColorFast, and we'll start with the primary correction, and we'll do a little bit of adjustment here to this picture. So the first step we want to do is a bit of a white balance. So it looks pretty good, but let's just drop into our white pick and grab an eyedropper. And what should be white? Maybe this building right here. We can click that there. And now you've seen it's gotten off a little bit more blue. This correction slider is a slider that at 0 basically doesn't do any of that white correction. At 100 does full white correction. Now this particular image didn't have much of a problem there, but you can see a slight shift from a little bit of a pinkish hue inside the whites of the clouds of the sky. And then when I bring correction up to 100%, that pinkish hue is gone. We have a true white here in the sky. So the next thing we want to look at is let's just do some primary corrections here. Let's bump up maybe the saturation to 20 a little bit. We can go fully extreme, but we'll back it off to about 20. And then maybe do a little bit of an exposure setting. So it's a little bright, so maybe you want to knock down that exposure just a tad, and we can start to get richer colors here in the sky. And then finally, brightness. In fact, if we look at that, let's go to our video scopes in Vegas Pro, and you'll see what's going on there. When I work with exposure, notice that the whole waveform over here on the waveform monitor rises or falls without really changing its shape. So that is general exposure, much like a camera. And what you want to do is you want to drop your exposure down until you have the blackest levels that you want. So I'm going to knock those down. Notice if I go too far, I'm crushing my blacks, just below the 0 region here. I don't want to do that, so I just want to touch down right where they're at. And that looks pretty good. Now brightness operates a little differently. Brightness is a way of stretching or squashing this total waveform, and you'll see what I mean. So when I drag up brightness, notice how the highs extend out. And when I reduce brightness, the highs are crushed down. Now when I do this, the shadows aren't moving. They're staying put, but the top end is stretching or squashing accordingly. Let's add a little bit of brightness to this this picture. Let's do something like a 25. And now if we go ahead and turn off ColorFast, you'll see where we came from, and now you see where we're at right here. So subtle adjustment. You see the first unapplied is a little bit hazy, especially in the buildings right here. And simply applying ColorFast and doing a quick, simple corrections in the primary section, we have a very rich image and a very nice image. But we want to go a little bit further. We want to get into that secondary correction and make some specific adjustments and really get into those blue tones that we were looking for. So I'm going to close down the primary correction and open up secondary correction. Again, we had high, mids, and shadows and masks. We're going to focus on the high, mids, and shadows at this point. So in the high, mids, and shadows, we have a luminance range, which often you can leave at the defaults, but I'll show you how to operate them. Then we have highlights, midtones, and shadows, all in distinct areas. In fact, if I open up the highlights, you'll see we have a tint or a tone. So this tint right here, you can reduce or increase to add that tint or remove that tint away. We also have saturation. All colors are saturated all the way down to all colors in the highlight region are brought to no saturation, which would be a black and white. And finally, levels. You can push the brightness or luminance level or crush the brightness or luminance level. You can see how the sky is really getting dark. So before we make these adjustments, I first want to go into the luminance range and show you how ColorFast really helps you in a new way to inspect and see and control what your highlights are, what your midtones are, what your shadows are. There's this great tool called Show Mask. I'm going to drop this down, and I'm going to turn on highlights. So here's your highlights right here. Let's take the spread all the way down. Let's take the blend all the way down as well. And so blend and spread are ways for your high, mids, and shadows to cross over or fade together, but we're taking that out at the moment to really show you what's happening with the luminance range. So your first slider is the highlight threshold. This is the ability to control where your highlight region ends and where midtones begin. So if I had the highlight threshold all the way up at 100, I'm essentially saying I don't have any highlights. Well, I don't want to do that, so let me walk that down until we start bringing in some of that highlight region. And I'm going to bring it down until it starts eating into the buildings here, because I want to make sure that the buildings are clearly a separate area that I can control. So maybe something like that. And now we would want to do the shadow threshold. So let's change our show mask, and let's look at the shadows. Where are they? So right now they're at the bottom of the building. Now the shadows right now are kind of creeping in the lower half of this glass. The upper half of this glass is in the midtones. I want to be a little bit more distinct. I want these deep shadows to really only be the shadows. So if I grab the shadow threshold and bring it down to 0, again, I'm essentially saying I don't have any shadows. But that's not true in this case. I want the 3 ranges of control. So I'm going to draw that up until it just starts creeping up the building here. So I know that all my black regions really are in that shadow range. So let's go ahead and go back to Show Mask None so we can see the original image. And blend and spread, actually, let's go back just a little bit more. I'm going to go back to my highlights and show you what blend and spread is all about. Blend is essentially a crossfade between high, mids, and shadows. So if I drag this up, notice how there's this gentle crossfade between them all. If I bring in the spread, notice it's a blurring of that mask. Now that produces different results. You can have highs, mids, and shadows at the different luminance levels. And if you use spread, that blurring between the ranges tends to preserve detail or bloom detail depending on which you pushed and pulled. And blend has a different kind of effect as well, and we'll see what that looks like. So let's take them all down to 0. And let's go to show mask, none. And let's make a mid-tone adjustment, let's say. Let's really bring up the levels in the mid-tone. Let's say, or just bring them down even. So notice already, you have this, in the sky over here, you have this cleft between your highs and your mids. Now, if I bring in blend, that gets eradicated. Or if I bring in spread, that also gets eradicated. I know in this particular image, I want a little bit of a blend, maybe about 25 or so. So we're going to start working with these. So let's go to our highlights. And in our highlights, we want to do, let's say, a tint. We want to cool this thing off. We want it blue. So instead of pushing and getting orange, I want to pull that tint and get more blue. Now, these are the default colors that come with ColorFast. So you have these different oranges that are really set to be kind of a colored temperature, a light temperature value. So if you push, you get warm. If you pull, you get cool. Now you can adjust what this color pick is. Let's say you have a very specific color you're going after. You can color pick that, or you can move around the color wheel. We'll get into that a little bit later when we're really trying to influence some blues in the next shot of the woman. But for right now, I'm just showing push and pull. So we'll do something like a -40 here. And then saturation, that we won't touch in this case because we're working on the highlights, and those are a little hard to see. But level, we want to bring up those highlights. We want that sky to really be bright. So I can push that highlight really high. Now I can uncheck with the enable checkbox and see what my highlight adjustment has done. So let's close up the highlights and let's move on to the midtones. Midtones, again, we can add and be warm, or we can subtract and become cool. So we can do something like maybe a -25. So let's get kind of this steely look about the skyscrapers. Now we do want to have some rich saturation, so I can really push up the saturation, get very strong colors. That's a little too intense. Maybe back that down to something like 25 or something of that nature. So levels as well, we could just leave that at maybe a -10. And then finally, let's work with our shadows. So shadows, I don't care to give any particular color bias. I just know that I want to deepen those shadows, so I can knock that down to maybe -40, 45, something of that nature. So now we've got a very strong contrast image, a lot of coolness going on. In fact, if I uncheck ColorFast to see what we were originally with, you see a little bit of a hazy image. It's got a little bit of a pink hue. And if I turn ColorFast back on, now I have a rich, rich blue. The last thing I want to do is there's this orange building that you might find very attractive to this image, and I think that would be a good design choice as well. But since we're going with this blue notion, I want to use another plugin from Video Essentials 6. And that plugin is called Saturation EQ. So I'm going to go get the plugin, drag and drop it down to my clip, and it has some very interesting looks off the bat. I'm going to reset to none. And now you can see there's these bands of color. It's actually 8 bands. So you have distinctly red, orange, yellow, green, aqua, blue, purple, and magenta. And since this building is orange, I want to take out that orange, specifically without working with or adjusting the other saturations of the other colors. So I can pull back that slider of orange. And there's a little bit of red still in there, so let me pull back the slider of red as well. And now I've essentially eliminated all of the orange color within my scenes. I have more of like a white or gray building. So those are the fundamentals of ColorFast with a little bit of saturation EQ. As we go through the next couple examples, you'll get to see really how these operate, as well as in the next clip we'll get into the skin preservation mask and the shape mask, and you'll really see the full color set.
Thanks, Travis. We have time for a few questions. First question, what if there's no whites in the clip and you want to do primary corrections? What can you use?
Well, you don't need to have white per se. In fact, if it's actually kind of a gray tone, sometimes it even operates better. So anything in the image that you do not think should have any color bias, for example, some gray concrete, or maybe someone's gray shirt, or it's something of that nature. You can even pick off of like someone's black leather jacket. Some of the highlights of a black leather jacket sometimes work. So it doesn't always have to be white. Our color pick actually is a very strong algorithm. And notice how we put that. If we go back to the ColorFast controls in the primary section, we have this correction slider, like I mentioned. We put that in there because our white pick is so good that sometimes something you shot intentionally warm or intentionally cool can get kind of clinical, like you're in. So sometimes you want to dial out that white balance just a little bit. So that's a very powerful feature of ColorFast.
Great. Another question was about film gamma and the gamma settings. Can you give a little more explanation around that and how that works?
Definitely. We didn't get into film gamma in this particular clip, but this film gamma is kind of like a contrast in a sense that it crushes your highs and your lows, but it works in this filmic S-curve, so it's very gentle on your picture. Now our picture right now is already pretty contrasty, but I'll use it on here just the same. I'm going to go to my video scopes and notice the waveform here. We have our kind of crushed shadows and we have our bright highlights. Now when I bring up the film gamma, you'll notice that the center of this waveform thins out and pushes luminance towards the top and the bottom. So I'm going to go ahead and bring in the film gamma, and you see what happens to the waveform. It's opening up in the center. And this isn't the best clip to do it on. I'll do that on a couple other clips later on. But you'll see functionally what it does. It really crushes blacks and brightens whites and that kind of thing.
Great. And another question we can get to here is like a few questions about other NLEs that ColorFast is compatible with beyond just Sony Vegas.
Definitely. So today, the presentation is Sony Vegas Pro, obviously, but we work on a variety of NLEs as well. So we work on Adobe's Premiere Pro, After Effects. We also work on Apple's Final Cut 7, Final Cut 10. We work on Avid Media Composer. We work on Grass Valley Edius, and a number of other hosts too. So you're hard pressed to work on an NLE that ColorFast is not available for. So probably the next thing we can do is go on to our next clip, and you'll probably be even answering questions as we present. So we're going to go to this woman in here, and she's walking down the street. Now we have a very different scene. We have these blue skyscrapers, and we have this essentially kind of greenish presentation of this woman walking. In fact, if we go ahead and play this a little bit, she's walking down the street here. We want to adjust the way this whole thing looks. So the first thing we want to do is bring up an instance of ColorFast. I already applied ColorFast on here, and I already did a couple little tweaks just so I'm not spending a lot of time in review of what I've already showed you. But the main thing here is we want to work with the primary correction and get that into a certain scope. So first thing we want to do is a white balance. Now actually that question about white balance is perfect. Like where in this scene should I do a good white balance? Well, I could do the concrete here. I could do the back of the car, although it's blown out in such a way that it probably won't help me so much. But I do see this little badge here on her jacket. That's probably a really good thing to pick. So let me go grab that color picker and go into the badge, pop, and now we have a warmer image that's not so green. You can even see on the color pick that we've gone into this green range, and you simply say, hey, what was green? Make it true, make it white. So there we have our primary correction there. Saturation. We can oversaturate everything or undersaturate. I think this particular mood right here, we're going to want a little desaturation, not too much. As far as exposure is concerned, if we go back and look at our waveforms, this black is really down low. Maybe I want to pop that up just a skosh just to give me some room. So we can do something like a little 5. What I'm interested in is to get some detail in her black jacket is what I want to do here. Now, in the brightness, we want to extend the range of this whole picture. Notice a lot of the brights in the picture on the waveform here, they aren't really using the full range. So I want to increase that brightness. You can really see how I can go pretty far with that. It's a little too far. Maybe back it down to something a little more subtle, maybe like 25. So already you can see what we've done with turning ColorFast off and turning it back on. Much truer colors, especially in their skin tone. It's a brighter image altogether. And finally, film gamma, that question right here. We need a little film gamma. We want to have a little bit of that filmic look and not so much video. So I'm going to bump up film gamma just a little bit. I get a little bit of crush around her face and in her jacket, but not too much because I want to preserve those jacket details, something like that. All right, so now let's go into our secondary correction. I'm going to close up the primary correction, and we're going to look at high, mids, and shadows. Now, I've already done some picks for you. I'll do one example. Notice these are blues, not oranges like the defaults were. So I'm going to go into my high. So this is an example of where, you know what, I'm not trying to influence a warm or cool of what the image already is. In this case, dang it, I want blue. So I'm going to open up, I'm going to pick that blue that I want, and I'm going to make sure that that's in there. So as far as the tint is concerned, I want to positively control in the highlights. Now, highlights are never going to be as powerful as your midtones and your shadows just because there's not a lot of chrominance value in those highlights. But we'll get to the midtones, you'll really see the difference. But I'm going to push that blue in the highlights. And also my highlights are a little bright. I want to knock them down. I'm going to take that level and really pull it down. You know, one value that you guys are probably very familiar with, if you have a lower luminance level, your colors, your chrominance tend to look more rich or saturated. So now let's go to the midtone. So let's open up. Let's first just kind of add tint here. So I'm going to crank that tint just up to 100. It's kind of this brown look. I'm going to change my color. And notice while I'm changing it, you can see all these different influences we have. This green would kind of be a nice look for a different kind of story. But I'm going to get up into the blue area here and really get this deep blue happening. I also want to bring in, really drop that saturation. Really get a dark blue around here. Now you're thinking, shoot, we're losing our face. We're not getting a lot of detail there. Never fear, we'll get there with skin preservation. In fact, let's do the last thing here in the shadows. Let's put the shadows up because I'm starting to lose the jacket. I don't want to do that. So let me increase the shadows. We could go very far, but we're just going to go back to something like 20 and get a little bit more of that detail back in her jacket. So now we'll close up the high, mids, and shadows and start working on that skin. Now let's open up the skin preservation and see what the controls are. We have this color pick. We also have sensitivity and soften. This is the default setting right now. I'm going to go back up to that show mask. And remember how we saw our highlights, our midtones, and our shadows, and we could really see what's happening in each one of them? Well, now I'm going to look at my skin mask. So here's the skin mask, and we could actually invert that to see what that's doing here. It's really grabbing her skin right here. And the intention here is in the primary correction, I liked my skin. Now in the secondary correction, I've been pushing a lot of blues, but I don't want those blues to influence that skin tone. So we could do a couple things here. We could maybe change the sensitivity a little bit to really make sure that we get her face in there. Maybe something like a 67, 68. And also a little soften. Instead of 20, maybe back that down a little bit to maybe, I don't know, 15 or so. And then also we want to darken the pick a little bit. This is a great tip. Notice how a lot of the background is also being selected. A lot of this street had warm tones that were very similar to her skin, so you see that they're coming into the mask as well. Well, sometimes a great way to take care of that, especially since skin tone is often in the lighter range of this chrominance color, is to start running down your color pick and getting a deeper pick. And notice how, just with a little bit of move, I'm removing a lot of background that's being included into this mask. Now, I couldn't get rid of all of it. We're going to deal with that in the next tool called the shape mask. But we'll do this for now. So let me go back to that show mask and go back to none. So we see what the image is so far with a lot of our blues being pushed. And now I'm going to go to skin preservation and click the enable control. So you can see right there, it really brings back that face. We have a little garbage that we're going to deal with. We still have blue on the walls and that blue cast everywhere, and we're going to end up with a really nice image. So in this next step, we're going to use the shape mask to work together with the skin mask. We're going to use the shape mask as a garbage mat, if you will. So let's open up the shape mask, and we'll close down our skin preservation mask. And the first thing we want to do is, where is that shape? You can see these little X's in Vegas Pro on your workspace. When you have an effect selected with ColorFast, it shows your control points. In fact, if we just inspect this, show mask, drop down, shape mask, you get to see where this shape is right now. Now I want to basically get around her face and her scarf and make sure that nothing else of that background is really being included. We'll do something like that. And we can put a little curvature in this too. It's not just 4 sides. We can increase the curvature to really get a nice rounded look. Maybe something like 59, 60. We can adjust our points to be really where we want them. In fact, a little later on in the picture, she brings up her hand. We want to make sure her hand is in this because it's a skin tone that we want to work with. And then finally, we can do a little bit of feathering. So instead of just having a hard edge, we can feather this up, maybe a feather or something super soft like 50. Because the point of color correction, you don't want to see these shape edges. They're very, very loose in that sense. So let's go ahead and go back to look at our original image. And we can slide back here to this point. And now we're going to enable that shape mask. Now what happened? Well, the shape mask is not yet working with the skin preservation. So we want to limit the color mask. We'll check that. And we know, because the face right here, we want to invert this as well. So now you see, I'm going to disable the shape mask to see what was, and now enable it to see what is. And you can see how it's really controlling things. There's a little bit of darkness coming onto her scarf. Maybe I'll just drop that down a bit. Really see what that looks like. And now, in this case, we have the shape mask pretty tight. Now the luminance, high mids, and shadows, and the color mask or skin preservation, that's going to follow your image because your image is luminance and color. The shape mask is a little different story because if you have a moving subject, you are going to want to keyframe at times. That's also a reason to stay a little loose with your image. But we're gonna keyframe this. So let's see. Let's go ahead and enable keyframing for the 4 points. 1, 2, 3, 4. And we're going to run through and see right about where she starts moving away. Notice how she's getting some blue on her face. So let's back it up to about here, and let's keyframe it. So let's add keyframes at this point. And now she's going to move to this new section. And what we do is simply move our control points, and keyframes are automatically being made for us. There you go. And we'll go on a little further and see if she moves somewhere else. Oh, she moved somewhere else just a little bit. There you go. So we will move those control points again at that point in the keyframer, and we'll have that keyframed up right there. All right, so now we have a clip that you wouldn't know there's a mask happening, but here it is anyway. And if we turn off ColorFast completely, you'll see how far we came. So here's the original image, kind of that yellowy, kind of green cast that we originally had. And when you turn ColorFast back on, there's very rich skin tones that are in a true nature, while the rest of the image has this really blue look to it. So now you've seen a little bit about what the skin preservation mask can do, as well as what the shape mask can do. And this is probably a good time for more questions.
Thanks, Travis. A question here regarding the masks. Now, we saw you add a shape mask and a skin mask, and people want to know, can you add more than one mask at a time? So, multiple shape masks or multiple skin masks if required.
You can definitely add multiples, and the method in which you would do that is you would simply apply another instance of ColorFast, because each instance of ColorFast comes with a shape mask, a skin preservation, a high emitter shadow. It's just the notion of kind of the API and working as a plugin within the NLE that you can't kind of dynamically throw in new control sets. But because we're a plugin, we easily work within the chain. So for example, if you went back to the video effects and you grabbed another instance of ColorFast and dropped it down, applied it right there. Now what we want to do is just do, let's say, a vignette of sorts. So let's look at our mask. Let's just see what the mask is, shape mask. All right, that's kind of a default nice oval around there. Let's go into the feather and just kind of feather that up just a little bit. And then we'll get out of this inspector. And now what we want to do is go into our highlights, midtones, and shadows and start dropping down the luminance. For example, in the shadows, I can bring that level way down. Oh, I haven't turned on my shape mask, have I? Enable it. There we go. And then in the midtones, we can drop down those levels as well. Looks like my feather's a little too intense, so let me bring down my feather there. Oh, it's working on the inside, not on the outside. So let's invert our shape mask, and now you can see no feather, some feather. We've added this great vignette. So that we're simply adding a vignette with another instance of ColorFast.
Great. Another question we had regarding the primary and secondary color correction. If you want to know, can you skip the primary? Do I need to do the secondary? Kind of where does the ball lie in terms of those two?
Well, as you saw, ColorFast obviously has both sections in it, but there's no reason why you have to use every control within ColorFast. In fact, a lot of workflows, you might simply want to just use that primary correction for your general exposure and white balance, and that be the only tools you use. Notice that when we put ColorFast on in the first place, it didn't affect your image at all. So you can use whatever you want. In fact, using the skin preservation and shape masks, those really work with that secondary color correction, and they don't influence the primary. So it all depends on your workflows, but you are free to use whatever subset of controls in ColorFast.
Great, thanks. And we saw you change colors earlier on when you were playing around, and someone was asking if you can change a color completely, so her scarf to blue instead of being yellow with ColorFast.
Color replacement is not an area of function that ColorFast specifically has, because that, as you see, we have tint. We can add tint or remove tint, but we don't like look at a color and change it up. Now that said, we do have a product that does exactly that, and that is in Video Essentials 6, and that is called Color Replace. So we can drag and drop that on the timeline here. Now some defaults of blue and green. Let's go to reset to none just to start from scratch. And let's say we want maybe her scarf to be another color. So what color do we want to start with? So let's color pick this orange, yellow orange, and we want to change it to maybe a richer orange or a red or something like that. Let's do that. And now let's start bringing in that range. And now you can see how, especially with a little bit of fade in there, we've really changed that up. And now it's a little too intense. Let's bring that mix back a little bit. But now we have more of an orange in her scarf. And so you can see how a color can really be replaced really easily. So before, after, before, after. So that can definitely be achieved with one of our plugins from Video Essentials 6.
Very cool. And lastly, I think we already addressed this, but the multiple editions of masks, they're working one with the other. So the first instance would work with the second instance. And does it matter which order you're adding these extra instances of masking?
The order definitely matters. So it's an effects chain. So you can think who comes before the next. So up here in Biggest Pro, you can see kind of this order of effects happening. First is this first instance of ColorFast, then this second instance, and finally the Color Replace tool. It matters a great deal, depending on what that first instance provides to the second. It really is kind of this waterfall of controls.
Great. Looks like we can move on to the next section.
All right, so that was a walkthrough of all of the main features of ColorFast and your high vids and shadows, your skin preservation, your shape mask. Now we're going to look at a couple of unique examples of correcting some certain problems as well as doing a grade over a whole sequence. This next clip here is a shot of two buddies talking about something. This is actually from a show called The Flip Side. It's broadcast on YouTube by a network called Soul Pancake, and they have great productions. That every one of their productions is supposed to be thought-provoking, supposed to be thinking about values as human beings in the world, and it's a very positive, great show. This particular Flip Side episode is this gentleman here is talking with his friend, and his friend is like, "Hey, there's this urban legend that there's this restaurant that you can actually make an appointment with your future self." He's like, "Yeah, right, whatever." So we're going to look through a couple of clips of that show. I recommend watching it. It's one of the most highly rated shows there. So it's got a guest appearance with Andrew Weber. So let's go ahead and look at this image right here. There's a couple different problems. This is actually shot on a red camera. In fact, if we in Vegas, if you right-click and select in the project media list, you'll notice in the project media list, it's a .r3d file. And if I right-click and choose File Format Properties, you'll see all these different format properties coming from that R3D decode. So these are red files operating in Vegas Pro, and we're going to work with them today. You can work around with your ISO and change those up, but we'll leave them as is just because we're focusing on ColorFast. So the first thing we want to do is figure out how we can do a basic white balance on this. So the cups would be kind of an obvious thing to do. Now, sometimes when you've gone through some corrections already, which I have a couple corrections happening in the highlights and the midtones and such, your white pick in Vegas Pro, it's best if you disable the effect before you do your white pick to make sure that that original image is really what our white pick is looking at. So I've disabled the effect, and now I'm going to go ahead and white pick this cup would be probably the most obvious, white styrofoam cup. Definitely a green cast in this picture. And now I'm going to enable ColorFast. So already you kind of have some nice skin tones happening. I'm going to disable, you see kind of that greenish hue, and enable things that are much more true. There is some more work to be done, especially in the sky. This sky was so bright, just with the even with the red, it was not really handling that bright sky at that particular exposure. You got kind of that pink aberration happening in the picture. So we want to deal with that. So let's go into our highlight range. And we could pick the tint orange, or we could simply desaturate, which I think is probably the best thing here. So saturation, I'm going to drag that down. And notice it's already taken that whole pink out of that whole region. In fact, if we look, show mask, highlights, you'll see the highlights are really relegated right over here to this bright sky. So we know what we're working on. That's a great thing about ColorFast. You can actually see exactly what you're working on. And now as far as level is concerned, maybe we want to pump up the level just so it's kind of a nice bright sky there. Something like a little 15 or so, just a tad. So here's the original image, kind of green cast. It's got that pink aberration in the sky. And now ColorFast is very quickly taking care of both of those activities. Now you can do another thing as well. Actually, we get into that whole chain effect, right? We have these two buddies that are talking here, and they are the subject. Although in reality, the right hand of the image is actually quite bright, potentially distracting from your main subject matter. So what we want to do is we want to get a vignette going. We just want to do a vignette with another instance of ColorFast. So up here, I already have another instance of ColorFast, but I haven't done anything with it. Let's inspect the shape mask to see where our shape mask is. Notice we have the shape mask here. We can move that around with these control points in Vegas Pro and get it just around our buddies here. So I'm going to jump out of this inspection, and let's go to our midtones and bring the levels. We're talking about levels, just brightness and darkness down to -30 or something like that. There you go. You can already see that edge of the shape mask. And maybe we could go into the lows and really bring those down, maybe to like 70 or so. And then finally, we could add a little bit of feather. So you have this edge here. We don't want that. So let's go into our masks, shape mask, and here's the feather control. And let's bring this up just to the pad right there. There we go. And now you have an image that has this outside darken. In fact, if we turn off this vignette, you can see the vast difference in happening. Now, the great thing about using ColorFast as a vignette tool is that it's not just adding black on top of your image. It's actually working with the luminance values of your image. So it's a little different look than a typical vignette tool, which just kind of like overmasks black. So those are just a couple steps of how to make this image happen right here, especially with that white balance and those color aberrations. Now the next sequence here is after this buddy has talked with his friend. He's like, yeah, right. Well, I'll go to the restaurant anyway and check it out. So he makes an appointment with his future self. While he's at the restaurant, he finds this woman here. So we have this woman, we have our main character, and then we have our main character who's much older. So here's Steven Weber here, and this is I'm not going to spoil it. You guys watch it. But we'll show really quick. If we inspect what we have with this correction, I'm going to turn off this correction. This was the original R3D file, or the red camera file. And we've done all the same kinds of things with primary, secondary correction to show what can be done just with a primary correction. And really brightening her up, making nice colors. I haven't really done much of a mood cast yet. I'm just kind of trying to make it true, but warm. Now we can go on to our main character. I just want to show you by turning off ColorFast what the original image was, and then simply by doing some major changes, we can see how far we can go with this. Now there's a great feature within Vegas Pro that helps you color match, especially when you have a conversation going. So let's go back to the woman, and right up here at the top of your preview, there's a copy snapshot to clipboard. And that's going to take an image what's in your preview file. Let's go ahead and grab that. And then when we go to our gentleman, we can go up to our split screen view, and we can drop down, and we can use the clipboard as our split screen view. So now you see her, now you see him, and now you can really do some nice color matches. For example, I had a particular white pick that I had to actually back off a little bit because when it was fully there, it was a little too cool. And it wasn't quite as warm as she was, so I could drag that down a little bit. That's a little too orange, so I'm just gently changing it a bit. But it's a great workflow within Vegas Pro to really match colors and work using the ColorFast and work with anything you want in that case. Finally, let's jump over to turn off that split screen. Our subject here. Now I'll show you what the original shot was. We'll turn off this effect, and this was the original R3D file, and you can see that our character in this case, Steven Weber, who should be the focus of the shot, is actually in a deep shadow, and you can see better the couple sitting at the table. So what we want to do in this case is we want to focus our corrections just to Steven Weber here. So let me turn the corrections back on, and just you've seen this work before. Here is that the shape mask. And we can move the shape mask to see what we've done with this lightening of this particular scene. Now, if I hadn't moved this mask, you would have never even noticed that a mask was there. But now you do. So we have these three shots all happening really in the same restaurant. So we want a similar mood cast or a similar grade. A great thing that you can do within Vegas Pro is apply a correction or apply ColorFast, an effect, to a whole track. So we're going to do that. We're going to go to Video Effects, grab ColorFast, and drag it, drop it down to the track header, and apply an instance of ColorFast. Let's go back to the woman. This is our example. And a great thing within ColorFast is you have a lot of presets you can work with. And most of these presets, since they don't really know the original intent of the shot, they're not so corrective in nature, they're more grades or looks. So we can start walking through them, starting with reset to none. Got this black and white here, which is a very nice black and white, kind of this bloom and blue. And we can just roll through and see these different blue skies, kind of a nice one, even though it's probably not intended for that. That's buttery. And so you have all these different looks here. Maybe something like ominous. Maybe it's a sci-fi scene and she's about to stab the guy. Or the era is kind of gloomy. And each one of these presets, it's just a preset. So you can go in there and say, hey, let's bump up the brightness on this one and really get an interesting look on this whole image. But what I'm going to do, in fact, there was this one called Warm, which was pretty nice. It kind of has this restaurant feel about it. But I'm losing some of that skin tone. She's a little orange, even though the background is kind of nice. So I'm actually going to load in a preset that I saved. So I'm going to go to Open Preset. Notice right here at the bottom of the presets list is where you can save your own preset. I'm going to open a preset here. And what I'm going to do is pick this warm grade and open that up. So it's a nice warm grade. In fact, if I go to these other clips, you see that warm grade is happening on these 3 clips because it's all part of this one track. So let's go back to the woman and let's get some of this orange off of her, but allow it to be in the whole scene. And you probably already guessed what I'm going to be doing. I'm going to get into those masks, and I'm going to use that skin preservation mask. Now, if I inspect again, skin mask, you'll see what's happening here and see where it's applying. So we can adjust, what that mask is going to do. A little bit. I don't want much of that couch on. A little bit's not a problem because it's really not noticeable. Something like that. Maybe change a little soften or what have you. I'm going to just get out of here, and I'm going to enable the skin preservation mask.
Thanks, Travis. A few questions. Actually, can you run through the custom preset process? So just creating it and then saving it, and then loading it again.
Oh, definitely. Let's say we want to drop down and do something like warm. Let's see. Let's go back to our track header here and do something like bloom and blue. Maybe we like that, or let's say the era, and we make an adjustment to this preset. Let's say we bring in some brightness here. Have this nice look. It's a little bloomy, so let's go into our luminance range and maybe knock down that bloom a little bit so it's a little harder. Something like that. Now I've made a custom look, and I want to save that up. So what I would do is drop down the presets list. I go to Save Preset As, and we could say My Era, and save. So now that's a preset that I could bring up to something else. Let's say, let's go back to these guys right here, and I don't know how good this will look, but we're going to open this preset. There's My Era, open. Yeah, it looks pretty good. So now you have My Era as a preset being applied to another clip.
Another question we had was regarding noise reduction. So if someone's going to apply noise reduction, should they do it before ColorFast or after ColorFast?
Well, since ColorFast is looking at a lot of, especially the chrominance values too, when you're working with the color, noise essentially is a scattering of chrominance values as well as luminance values, but a lot of chrominance in there. So given that, it's good to do noise reduction before you work with ColorFast, because what you've essentially done is you've removed a lot of those color aberrations from the picture, and then ColorFast is looking at a smoother response in your chrominance and your luminance, and it'll help ColorFast perform better.
Another question came in regarding the rendering. Does ColorFast render faster at a track level or on individual clips?
That would probably be guys the Vegas Pro in this case. I don't see any reason why it would operate any differently at a track or clip basis. Because what essentially is happening is ColorFast is GPU accelerated. And what that means is we have our own OpenGL engine that talks directly to your graphics card. So the better graphics card you have, the more up-to-date drivers you have, just the quicker performance you're going to get. And so we're talking to that graphics card to do our processing. We've been given a frame by Vegas Pro, whether that is the result of putting an effect on a track header or the result of putting it on a clip itself or an event itself. I believe the frame coming into us looks identical. So I believe you will get the same performance.
Another question came in regarding, is it possible to put ColorFast effects on the total image output, not just whole track, or just the whole track. I'm not sure exactly.
Well, in Vegas Pro, these are kind of Vegas Pro specific questions actually, the workflows. There's a number of ways to put effects onto elements. One of them would be what you've been seeing us do, is put it directly on an event here in the timeline. Another way is the track header. You can also go to your project media and apply an effect right on the source media before it even gets in the timeline. So that there's a number of ways to apply effects. Across the whole thing. And if your whole edit was on the same track, of course, that would work as well. But there's a lot of flexibility in Vegas Pro about where you put effects.
And lastly, there's a question regarding just creating a black and white image. I know you brought in saturation EQ before, but is there a faster way just to get right to it? And do you need saturation EQ in that case?
In the case of doing a whole black and white image, no, you don't need saturation EQ, because essentially you'd be going down that control set. Okay, take out the red, take out the orange, take out there is a preset for that. But I think probably the better way to go is just to go into your primary correction of ColorFast and see the saturation slider. Just throw it down to the back side. Now, yeah, let's take off this track effect here. So we'll just work on the effect of the woman herself. So there you go. So you just take the saturation all the way out. One thing to note, you could also pick a preset, just black and white. There you go. And increase some of the brightness, exposure there. There you go. Now, do note that in the primary correction, just because you took saturation all the way down, doesn't mean you can't be introducing color in your secondary correction. So notice how I'm going to start pushing orange in. And now I'm pushing an orange into my highs, my mids, and my shadows. So do be aware that if you go back to the primary correction and you take saturation all out, do be aware that you might have included or introduced tones or tint inside your high, mids, and shadows. If you're still seeing color, that's probably the case. But probably the easiest thing to do is the preset called black and white.
And one more question here regarding chroma key. Someone seems to know about other plugins here. So they want to know how well does it work with chroma key, and how do we use it before or after ColorFast, before or after the application of chroma key?
Well, ColorFast I would recommend to be something that you put on the kind of composite of your chroma key. So especially if you're working with, you're knocking out a key, and then of course you put that subject matter over some other background. After the key has done its job, then you want to be colorizing or correcting or adjusting using ColorFast to make sure your subject matter matches your environment that they're superimposed over. So I would use Chroma Key Pro first, and then ColorFast afterwards if you're adjusting your subject matter. Conversely, if you want your subject matter as is, but you want your background to be different, of course you put ColorFast on the background. That said, something that I've found that really aids and assists in great keys is to use that Video Essentials 6 saturation EQ and really push the greens in an image. And it tends to even out your greens, even if you have kind of weird aberrations in the background, and it allows Chroma Key Pro to actually make a tighter grab of what your green screen was, or blue in that case. So little tip, to make Chroma Key Pro work even better, put a little bit of saturation EQ ahead of it and punch up those greens.
Thanks, Travis. Well, that wraps up the ColorFast Color Reinvented webinar. You can find more information about ColorFast, view our library of tutorials, and access our help files by following the links on your screen, as you can see them now. Feel free to submit any questions we might have missed to support@newblueinc.com. And also keep an eye out for the follow-up email that will include the full recording of the webinar. On behalf of Travis White, as well as the NewBlue FX team, thanks for joining us and have a great day.